Good evening and welcome to the LGBTQ Consortium. My name is Kim Hunt and I'm Executive Director of Affinity Community Services. Affinity is a social justice organization that works with and on behalf of Black LGBT communities, queer youth, and allies. And our work centers around civic engagement, health and wellness, and leadership development. And we do a bunch of stuff underneath all of those umbrellas. And we're going to talk a little bit about something related to health and wellness tonight. But before I go there, I want to send our condolences and our thoughts and our prayers out to the many people who were involved in the accident last night on I-94 in Indiana, that huge pileup with almost 50 cars and trucks, and just goes to show that you just, in the blink of an eye, your life can change so much. So our hearts go out to those folks. And Happy New Year. It's January. So I have a fantastic guest here tonight to talk with us about a very interesting topic. And this is something that, this is Dr. Phoenix Matthews, who I'm going to introduce in just a moment. But Phoenix shared this information at our community forum in December that was at the Chicago Urban League. And the focus was LGBTQ people, Black LGBTQ people in particular, and public policy, and a discussion around what's going to be happening after the marriage equality fight, because we know that we are not done just because we can get married. There's still a lot of work to do, and we're going to talk more about that in the coming months. But for now, we're going to talk about something that was in the health and wellness section of that panel, and I think you're going to be just as fascinated as I was. So let me take a moment to introduce our guest, Dr. Phoenix Matthews. And Phoenix is an associate professor and clinical psychologist at the University of Illinois at Chicago. Phoenix is nationally known for health disparities research with underserved populations, primarily focused on the development and evaluation of culturally tailored cancer risk reduction interventions. And Phoenix's recent research focuses on the use of community-based and culturally tailored health promotion interventions to reduce risk factors associated with cancer disparities. Phoenix currently serves as the co-principal investigator of an NIH-funded study to conduct a randomized clinical trial of a culturally tailored and non-tailored smoking cessation intervention for LGBT adult smokers. Dr. Matthews is also director of the Recruitment and Retention Core of UIC, Center for Clinical and Translational Science, and is the Helen Grace Diversity Scholar in the College of Nursing at UIC. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
I should say also that Phoenix is a former board member of Affinity and did some wonderful research a little while ago. I can't remember what year that was, on Black, lesbian, and bisexual women and their health outcomes.
Yeah. That's interesting. As I was thinking about that today, what an important time in both my personal and professional life, my involvement with Affinity. It was during that time that I did my first study of sexual minority women.
Wow.
And it really launched my my career in doing sexual minority health research. So for that, I am forever grateful to Affinity and for the more than 250 women who participated in the Take Charge study. So,
and I will say, you know, that's still one of the few studies out there that focuses on same-gender loving women who are of color. And Amigas Latinas recently did a similar study that I think you helped with.
That's right.
So it's very important to get that information, that research out about our folks, and it's wonderful when we can do that research ourselves. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. So why don't you introduce us to this wonderful topic that we're going to hear more about?
Right. And so the vast majority of my work now focuses on looking at cancer-related disparities. And one of the prime contributors to cancer and other health risks is smoking. And Few people realize the rates of smoking in the LGBT communities. Right now, currently in the general population, smoking rates are about 19% overall. But smoking among sexual minority men and women ranges between 30 and can go up to 45% of smoking. And so there's a huge disparity in terms of LGBT smoking rates. Within that, if you look specifically at African American and other communities of color, our rates are on the upper end of that prevalence rates. And the reason for that is that we have a greater likelihood of being lower income, unemployed, which is very strongly associated with smoking rates. The other important thing about what has happened over time is that now is the 50-year anniversary of the Surgeon General's report on smoking and the health consequences of that. And at that time, nearly half of all Americans were smokers. And it was the first report that laid out the tremendous health risk associated with smoking. And since that time, there's been a gradual reduction in smoking rates to about the current 19% that we see now. But at this point, we have some interesting things that are happening related to policy. In 2009, the Congress passed what was called the Family Tobacco Control Act. And that act was passed to reduce smoking among young people and adolescents, and specifically to reduce prevalence and access to flavored tobacco products. Cherry flavored, the vanilla, the bubble gums, those flavorings that are clearly not targeted towards adults but towards children. The one thing that went along with that banning of flavored cigarettes was that they did something called the menthol exemption. To be able to get this passed through the Congress, we know that the tobacco industry is a very powerful lobbying institution. They agreed to exempt menthol through that, banned all other flavors with the exception of menthol. Now, the interesting thing about that is that the vast majority of young people, 48%, smoke a mentholated brand of tobacco, meaning that the one flavoring that is used by the vast majority of young people was exempted from that Tobacco Control Act.
From a policy that was geared towards reducing smoking among young people.
Absolutely. I call it the policy statement that went horribly wrong, and for many reasons. The first relates to youth smoking, but for people of color, there is also sort of a double whammy associated with the federal government's failure to regulate menthol and ban mentholated cigarettes. 80% of African-American adult smokers smoke a mentholated brand of cigarette.
80%. Wow.
80% of, let me just say that again.
Yes, please.
80% of African-American smokers smoke a mentholated brand. Not just any mentholated brand, a particular mentholated brand. You want to venture a guess of what that might be?
I'm going to let you say it.
All right. Otherwise known as the black cigarette in the community, it's a Newport cigarette.
Newport, see them everywhere.
Newport cigarettes. And so whenever you have a community that is so overwhelmingly engaged in the use of one specific type of product, you ask many questions about that, right? So regardless of the policy failure to regulate menthol, we have this long-standing issue in the community of very pernicious targeting, directed targeting by the tobacco industry of communities of color. 80% of African Americans, 50% of Latino smokers smoke a mentholated brand. We know that happens because of price fixing in minority populations, communities, right? Lower prices associated with those products. We see that as related to free giveaways, coupons, those products that go out. Much more likely to be the case in low income and minority populations. But there was even more disturbing. There was a study that was conducted in 2011 that showed that cigarette prices for mentholated cigarettes, and in particular Newport, were much lower around schools, at the convenience stores and gas stations around schools that served African American and Latino children. So not only is there this targeted, but there's a price fixing to increase the ability of minority students and young people to afford their product.
Wow.
We know that tobacco addiction is an addiction of adolescence. The vast majority of smokers, current adult smokers, started smoking anywhere between ages of 13 to 16, 17.
13.
Yes. So this is an
goodness.
addiction, an issue of adolescence. And when we see, again, this widely used flavored product being advertised in the ways that it is in our communities, especially around the schools, it's a very, very concerning issue. With that, with menthol, is a lot of other concerning things, such as all the studies consistently show that African Americans are less likely to quit smoking than other individuals who are going through a stop smoking intervention. We've gotten much more sophisticated, and we now understand that it's not race, it's the increased likelihood of smoking a mentholated brand that reduces the ability of black smokers to stop smoking. That's right. Mentholated cigarettes are much more addictive than other types of non-mentholated cigarettes. Right.
Wow.
Right.
What is that? Is it the menthol itself? Is there some other additive?
So the level of nicotine that's present in a menthol is much higher in mentholated cigarettes compared to non-mentholated cigarettes. And there is some discussion about the pairing of the nicotine and the menthol that makes it much more difficult to of a powerful addiction because of pairing of both a flavor that we see in everyday life, as well as the nicotine, which is highly addictive.
Oh my goodness!
Right.
Wow. You mentioned poverty and unemployment also being high predictors of smoking.
That's right.
What is that about?
Right. Well, we know that individuals who have poor levels or lower and inadequate levels of education and employment opportunities experience much higher levels of stress. Stress due to pressures of poverty, stress due to living in neighborhoods that they're able to afford, but unfortunately are under-resourced and have higher levels of concentrated poverty, and with that oftentimes violence. We know that nicotine, it is addictive, but it also has calming properties as well. And so an individual may start to smoke because of peer pressure, the prevalence in the community, but the thing that maintains smoking initially is that it is a very powerful stress reducer, right? It has a calming effect. But then as a person continues to smoke on a more regular basis, you have that combination of a calming effect as well as a powerful addiction. So that is what we see in with lower income and educated individuals, using nicotine as a way of coping with daily stressors.
Now, you mentioned the policy part of this, and part of it was the menthol piece, but we also at that forum talked about, at the time, it was the one policy piece that the city council had just passed regarding menthol cigarettes. That's right. And increasing the ban zone, if you will, around schools where they could be sold from the previous law of 100 feet, 100-foot radius around a school to 500. Now 500, yes. Which is
still very close.
Kind of close, right? Right. And I don't know how that compares to what other cities are doing, but I know that for the city of Chicago, there is this additional concentrated effort to reduce smoking among youth. And another piece related to that was also the e-cigarettes, which are becoming increasingly popular, and I believe the City Council recently passed legislation banning the smoking of e-cigarettes indoors, just like with regular cigarettes. So can you talk a little bit more about e-cigarettes and what's going on with those?
Sure. First, I'd really like to applaud the Commissioner of Health, Dr. Bashar. He has really stepped forward in terms of all the major cities in the United States to really take on big tobacco head on. Yeah. And he was recently honored at the White House for his leadership in tobacco control in the country. To my knowledge, Chicago is the first city to have any type of regulation of mentholated cigarettes. Menthol regulation falls under the purview of the Food and Drug Administration, and they have, for the last 4 years, have failed to take any action despite overwhelming evidence of youth smoking, higher rates of addiction, and targeting by the tobacco industry. So Chicago, to my knowledge, is the first city who has done any type of restriction on mentholated tobacco, and that is in the form of adding mentholated flavored cigarettes to that 500 yard radius zone around schools. And so that has been very positive. Another significant policy decision that was recently passed was the increase in tobacco sales tax by an additional 50 cents. Yes. We know that the single most effective policy for tobacco control, prevention and control, relates to taxation laws. So the higher the cost of the cigarettes, lower use among youth, and higher increase in adults quitting behaviors. So that has happened in the last month or 2 months. And then finally, as you're pointing out, there has been, I think we're the second city in the country that has regulated e-cigarettes. E-cigarettes are now becoming increasingly popular with higher prevalence of indoor smoking restrictions. And so because the vapor that's emitted from an e-cigarette is advertised as being water-based and not smoke, they've been able to circumvent the indoor clean air laws. So the city of Chicago now, based on the available research that suggests that the vapor does itself cause health, is associated with health risk, primarily respiratory issues, eye irritation, and there are composites in that vapor that are known to be cancer-causing in high concentrations. Wow. And so using that data, the city also moved forward with including e-cigarettes in the same restrictions of all against indoor smoking. So no more smoking of e-cigarettes in bars and restaurants has been the case for the last 3 years, where people are using that as a way of circumventing clean air acts.
I want to remind folks, I'm so engaged in the conversation that I'm not even reminding people that this is a call-in show. So you can be a part of this conversation by calling 312-738-1060. I know that some people think that they can use e-cigarettes as a way of stepping down or stopping smoking. What do you have to say about that?
At this point, the e-cigarettes are not FDA, Food and Drug Administration, approved as a smoking cessation device. The e-cigarette companies, the tobacco industry, has been sort of putting that out there as the main purpose of e-cigarettes, but their advertising on their website says something very different. It essentially says, screw cigarette bans, use e-cigarettes, right?
Okay.
But what do we know about e-cigarettes as a way of cutting down and reducing? Well, the first fact about that is one that's not FDA approved as a cessation device. The second piece about that is that there are more people who are take up e-cigarettes for the first time who were never smokers, right? Okay. You're following me here? So people are picking up e-cigarettes and becoming addicted to them who were never previous smokers, all right? So that is a concern about it. Because e-cigarettes are now dispensed, the nicotine is dispensed in a cartridge. People who are familiar with smoking, they smoke a cigarette a half an hour, et cetera, et cetera. Because it doesn't come in the same type of device, we're seeing higher rates of nicotine poisoning in our emergency room.
Oh, wow.
For people who are, again, not regular smokers using these devices, and people who use cigarettes, typically migrating over to e-cigarettes and then overdosing themselves in essence.
Wow.
Now, to answer your question about whether or not e-cigarettes can be used as a harm reduction or a smoking cessation product, theoretically that is a possibility, such that if as a part of a stop smoking counseling program, if people were using it with the intention to specifically cut down and stop smoking, that it is possible. But again, the data suggests that the vast majority of people are using them as first-time smokers and to get a nicotine infusion when in places where they're not allowed to smoke regular cigarettes.
Interesting. That piece about overdosing on nicotine
Yes.
is just really scary. Oh, we have a call.
Yes, I have a question about the secondhand smoke. The person that lives in a house with a person that have a real bad smoking habit has to be careful with the secondhand smoke, because I'm dealing with that issue with my son, and I had to take a test for secondhand smoke, and he had diagnosed me with chronic lung disease, and then he gave me a inhaler, but I refused to take the inhaler. Then I went back and asked him for the X-ray. His wife wanted X-ray, so then he said that he didn't want to give me an X-ray, so I went and got an X-ray, but it said normal. But then I transferred to another doctor, but then it made me aware now I have to make sure my son go outside, because the secondhand smoke is very dangerous, and especially back-to-back, like every 15 to 20 minutes, because if they have like a mental problem or illness, they're going to really smoke.
Right. You are very correct to be concerned about secondhand smoke. We have known for about 2 decades now about the dangers of secondhand smoke, and that really spurred the laws around indoor smoking. But that doesn't apply to individual family homes. So I think the most responsible thing that smokers can do for the health of their family members is to maintain a smoke-free home and household. For people, it's exactly like the caller who have known respiratory illnesses. One of the strongest contributors to the higher rates of asthma among our black children, in addition to environmental exposures, a part of that is in-house smoking. And again, not to point fingers or blame, but a way that we take care of ourselves and our communities. If your decision is to smoke, please protect those around you by smoking outdoors.
Thank you for calling in with that. And we have another question here. Are cigarettes available to prison inmates? And if so, why are they accessible?
That's an interesting question. I don't know specifically. My understanding is that cigarettes can be purchased or can be used as obtained as a reward for good behavior. And so many people who go to jail were previous smokers, and so they're trying to manage that addiction as well. But I see it as an ample opportunity to get assistance with stop smoking through using medications that might be available through the prison health system. So anyone who has a family member who has any type of illness that can be made worse by smoking, it's an opportunity to stop smoking yourself to protect your own health. Anytime there are children in the home, it's an important incentive to make a change in your health behavior to protect your family members. And anytime there's a hospitalization or a time spent in jail, that is, again, an opportunity for people to do something very positive in terms of their overall health, and that is to stop smoking.
And in the minute that we have left, because this goes so fast, can you say more about if people want to stop smoking, what they can do?
Yes.
Or where they can go?
There is the state quit line is 100% accessible and free of charge. It has good success rate for individuals who complete the telephone counseling and use the materials. They also supply nicotine replacement, right? Your medical provider can write you a prescription for the patches or any other type of stop smoking medication that has been FDA approved. And then also for members of the LGBT community, there is a smoking cessation study that I run through Howard Brown Health Center called BTQ that is specifically available for LGBT smokers. So there are plenty of resources, and hopefully more people, especially people of color, will, given our history of being targeted by the tobacco industry, will take this opportunity to make a healthy choice for 2014.
And we'll make those resources available on our website and Facebook page too. So Phoenix, thank you so much for
been a marvelous
coming.
Experience.
I learned a lot. I'm sure other folks did too. We will be back next month, and we'll be talking about Black queer history with Victor Salvo, who is the executive director of the Legacy Walk, which is a commemoration of LGBT people in history. So again, thank you, and have a great night.
All right, good night.